All right, everybody, welcome to Better Together Tuesdays, where we are making business simple in complex times. This webinar is a 30-minute, fast-paced webinar, and we're trying to cover some topics that we here at the SBDC and KC SourceLink are fielding in great quantity during this time of COVID-19. So we're just trying to take some of those complex things, get them simplified for you with some guests who are experts in their field. And so welcome is divided into three segments. One is focus, next is innovate, and the last is engage. And all of this came about from the needs that I discussed, that I just mentioned to you, as well as a quote by Shelley Seifert that says, "Surviving and thriving in crisis is rarely a solo event." So we're here to do this together, because it's better together. This is the third episode. I'm your host. I'm Joel Barrett. I work at the Missouri Small Business Development Center as a business development consultant. And we're going to take this time to talk about gathering your financial projections and writing a business narrative for loan applications. So this week, the SBA has released more funds, or the government has released more funds for the SBA for the EIDL loan and the PPP loan. We've got a lot of people reaching out to us for assistance with those. So we're going to go over what it is that you need to be prepared for, because even though some of that application process might be easy initially, there will be some audits coming in the future. We know that the government is not just going to hand us out money and not have any concern about how it's being used or how we show for it. So I want to welcome my guests today. I have three guests. I have Shauna Huntington from Fortivity. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to pull up your website. Here we are. And this is Fortivity.com. And Shauna has an integrated banking and back office solutions company for entrepreneurs and progressive companies in a variety of industries. She spent her career looking for ways to improve the business operations process and empower entrepreneurs. She's worked in a wide array of entrepreneurship opportunities, public and corporate accounting, and has spent 12 years building a company and a team whose primary goal is to support the success of entrepreneurs and small business. Then I'm going to go over for our second guest. I want to welcome Nicola Price. She is business to business and consumer mobile tax and solutions. It's a client-centric firm based in Kansas City, and the company features a unique mobile component to complement its core services. Nicola Price founded B2BC Mobile Tax and Solutions in 2015, and she is working as a leader and has running over my words here. She began the company in 2015 during a time when the entrepreneurial community in Kansas City was thriving. Her undergraduate degree is in accounting from Keller and DeVry University, along with extensive and continued education in taxation. So she's a great leader in the community. And then finally, I want to welcome my last guest, which is Rebecca Goebbels. Rebecca is a colleague of mine at the Missouri Small Business Development Center, and she brings a banking and business entrepreneurial background to her role at the SBDC as business and program development specialist and a business coach. She teaches entrepreneurial classes and consults with business owners and manages numerous special projects. So welcome to my three guests, Shauna, Nicola, and Rebecca. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
So we're going to dive right in, and Rebecca, being my colleague, can attest to this, that one of the things that we have heard during this crisis is from a lot of business owners who are suddenly going, oh, I was supposed to have stuff in order, and they're realizing they don't have their books in order, they haven't kept good records, they haven't paid themselves in the right way, and now they're freaking out because there's these loans and they need the money, and they're just realizing maybe I wasn't as detailed as I should have been. So we want to talk about that today. I'm going to jump right in with some focus questions, and these first few are going to be directed to Shauna and Nicola, but we're not limiting it to them, so Rebecca, feel free to jump in.
You're out.
So Here's a question, a typical question that comes from some clients. I was told I need a bunch of financial records for this SBA loan, but when I filled out the application, it didn't ask for much at all, and yet I've already begun receiving the funds. Does that mean I'm off the hook? Shauna?
You want me to go first? All right.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is yes, you still need them. What we're still unsure of is exactly how the SBA is going to come and audit these loans, what the banks are going to require for forgiveness, for example, for the PPP. We're still not 100% sure on the guidance there. However, we know that they are going to do something, right? And we want to be prepared that they will do something, even if they end up not doing something, because it will impact your business a lot. So we are recommending that everyone has all their ducks in a row and has all their documents in order, so that you are prepared for that when it does come. One of the things we're recommending, especially for the PPP tracking, is a separate bank account, if at all possible, to keep them funds in, and transfer the money out of that bank account with some sort of a tracking mechanism that you can keep to tell what you transferred the money for, what it was covering, so that you know that you were using it for covered expenses that were allowed, and then also then it'll help you in the forgiveness piece of that. So
I've gotten a specific question about that very thing with a client that asked me, well, all of my bills are paid with a credit card. Can I just use my loan funds to pay the credit card bill?
So personally, we're trying to pay anything we can out of our separate account or with a check, so that we can document it very specifically. So we are like things that used to be paid. We used to pay like our rent with ACH, for example, and we wrote a check specifically for these. We're going to write a check during this time just to make it clear, because ACH is a little harder to track. So
okay, Nicola, do you have anything to add to that?
She pretty much covered it. That's the same advice that I would give as well. So
okay, well, let me ask you this question. What should this loan, all this documentation, these financial documentations that I have to present for a loan, what should that look like? What kind of format should that be in?
well, generally the bank will give you guidance on what they need and how they want to present it. Typically, they would want the financials, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement, things of that sort. Also, as well, some may even ask for your tax return, as well as your 940, 941, things like that, to validate that you've had payroll and you've made that payroll over the last 12 months.
Speaking
one
of
of the things I was just
go ahead,
one thing I will add to that is that a lot of the banks on this tracking mechanism for spending it, some of the banks have a specific tracker that they're wanting you to use that they may provide to you, while others just say, like, you've got the guidance, so spend it on what you can spend it on. So if you haven't received something specific from your bank, just do the best you can. But some banks are going to tell you, we want it in this format, we want it to look like this.
Okay. Question from the chat room. What is a 941?
That's the quarterly payroll tax return.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Speaking of payroll, this has been a really common one of clients coming through the center, is I'm self-employed or a 1099 contractor, and I never paid myself with a paycheck. I usually just take what's left over when there's some extra. So now what? What do we do about that? Nicola?
Sure. Well, what you do about that, generally what I've been running into is that the banks are asking for your Schedule C attached to your tax return, as well as any 1099s that they may have received, and then the profit and loss statement.
Yep.
Shauna?
Yep, we found the same thing. So your Schedule C from the most recent year you had completed, as well as your 2019 profit and loss statement showing your income and your expenses.
And would that be the same if you just take a monthly or annual owner's draw?
As far as what the banks have been asking for, yes. So whether you actually wrote yourself a payment every month for that amount of net income, they're looking at your Schedule C and they're taking that total net income and dividing it by 12 for your average monthly payroll. That's what we've seen.
Okay. So we hear a lot about financial projections, and I know Rebecca can speak to this as well. A lot of people feel very overwhelmed when you say projections, and they're like, where's my magic ball? I don't know. How do I figure projections. So I'm going to bring Rebecca in to comment on this one.
Oh, it's time for me?
It's
Is
time
that what you're
for
saying?
you. Yeah. On.
I'm allowed to participate now? Okay, jokes aside, you're right. Projections can be intimidating, but I've found that changing the phrasing to your best educated guess as to what might happen next can kind of take the stress down a notch. And they're like, well, I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm like, well, I don't either. So where would we start? Well, when do you think customers are going to come back? Is it going to be today? No. Is it going to be next week? Maybe. Okay. Well, so if you can technically open next week, ballpark, how many customers, what percentage of your customers do you think will buy something next week? Well, I don't know. How many are buying right now? 0. Do you think it'll be more than 0? Yes. Is it going to be 50%? Well, no. Well, then, all right. So it's just that process of narrowing it down to what feels intuitive to you. And notice I started with sales. In the process of doing projections, figuring out what your expenses is going to be is so easy. And so people are just like, oh, okay, so I'll do my expenses first, and then I'll figure out what do I think I'm going to sell. And then magically, I estimate that I'm going to sell enough to cover my expenses. Legal imposition. That's not how anything works.
That's not how any of this works.
Exactly. Geico commercial style. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So please start by projecting your sales first and doing that for at least 1 year into the future, because it keeps you out of the emotional temptation to then just fill it in with whatever number means you're going to be solvent. Because it's not to do an exercise to make yourself feel good. This is an exercise to make you as an owner feel strategically planned. And good and planned aren't necessarily the same thing. The whole point is so that you can see what's coming. And so, yes, please do your expenses, then put them in a mental drawer or any physical drawer if you're doing these by hand, and then project your expenses, and then combine them and see where you're at.
And I think to add to that, just to be realistic, so we talk about like what we hope might happen or what, you know, would be great if this happens, but then be realistic with what's what's gonna still be concerning to your customers and what might make them not come back. And, you know, like I would love it if 75% comes back next week, but is that realistic? Probably not. So not just what I want to have happen, but what could really happen and may happen. So.
Good.
Yeah, and I like to tell people as well that it's really not as complicated as people like to make it. If you create a budget, it's kind of like creating a budget. You know, if you keep that in mind as well when you're doing that.
Yeah, it's never going to be written in stone. It's a kind of a
Right.
living document, so to speak. So one of the things that we've encountered too is a lot of people who have gotten tax advice over the years of always trying to show a loss so that they don't have to pay taxes. And then now, how is that impacting the ability to get these SBA loans right now? Can Nicola or Shauna speak to that?
Nicola, you're the tax girl, so I got out of that game a while ago, so I'll let you talk to that.
Well, first thing, there's two things. So there's your books, and then there's your books that you use or your documents that you use for your tax return. So there's non-cash items that you'll deduct on your tax return, but not necessarily take those in consideration when you're making decisions about your operation. So one of those things would be like depreciation. So that's really like a non-cash expense that will show up on your Schedule C that doesn't necessarily take cash from the business. And so that might be one of those things that would make your net income negative, that you could, you know, back out and put that back in to possibly make your income positive. I really haven't come across that situation yet, but I haven't had anyone denied as far as the applications that I've assisted in going in. So,
Rebecca, can you speak to this a little bit? Because I know you have some opinions about this, about always showing a loss.
What are you talking? Me? For sure. Opinions? I don't know what you're talking about, Willis.
Same opinion, Rebecca. So
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so effectively, and I'm all for everybody thinking strategically about how to manage your cash flow. Tax payments are certainly a piece of your cash flow, and I am all for that. But simultaneously, there is a level of creativity that some employ in that endeavor that is closer to
she's going to try to be PC with this.
yeah.
Is there a F at the beginning of this word?
There is, but it's not my favorite one. This one is fraud.
Yes.
So here's the deal. I'm all for taking any legal tax strategy, but the deal is effectively anytime you're asking for a loan and you're going with constant losses, you're saying, hey, lender, whether it's the bank or the federal government or whoever, make me a loan. I'm good for it. Sure, on paper, it says I don't know how to make any money, but that's just creativity. And so then my natural question as the SBA or the bank or whoever is, this person is very creative. Are they using that with other people? And certainly not me. Or is it possible that they are using this creativity to blow smoke up my skirt? You know, that's the question. And so, you know, one of the things, Joel, you hear me talk about all the time is, everybody's personal life is their own personal life. But if you are the other, in my case, if I'm the other woman, I can be hurt and I can be betrayed. But if my man that I used to be the other woman for ends up cheating on me, I don't get to be surprised. I can be hurt, I can be betrayed, but I cannot be surprised, because the best indicator of future performance is historical performance. And a whole set of tax returns that year over year after year show that you make a loss tells me that the thing that's probably going to happen next is you're not going to make any dang money. So yeah, you pick me up.
On top of that too is the S Corp. I think what some people have run into is being an S Corp, but not paying yourself a reasonable salary. And so for the PPP specifically, they're looking at your actual payroll that you make, right? So a lot of people will try to do the S Corp to save on taxes and pay themselves a very little salary, but then make it all in distributions. And unfortunately, that's hurting you in this situation because they're looking at your payroll. But it also just goes, I always tell people that, they want to know what the number is they're supposed to pay to keep the IRS happy. I always tell people it's supposed to be whatever's reasonable. So if I had to go hire someone else to do my job, what would I pay them? That's what you should be paying yourself as a salary. And then everything else can be profits. But if I was not involved in this business, on working in the business, and I had to pay someone to do it, I'd have to pay them a salary that's reasonable for them to want to do the work. So you've got to pay yourself the same salary as well.
Joel, one of the things with your question was, how is it impacting these disaster loans? Yes. To Shauna's point, the W-2 payroll is showing up as a piece. You are allowed to count distributions on your PPP loan. And so historical losses are not dire in these disaster loan formats. However, it influences your ability to repay the debt. And it's going to deeply influence, even though it's not a huge criteria for these disaster loans, it is going to deeply influence your ability to get any type of financing in the future that isn't this somewhat hard to get a hold of disaster financing.
So thank you. That's good advice for all business owners. Rebecca, let's transition a little bit into this business narrative piece before we run out of time. You have encouraged people to prepare a business narrative for these loans. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, like a lot of times you hear like, you need a business plan for your loan. I'm like, oh, it's disaster times. No, ain't nobody got time for that. But you should probably have a narrative that describes who in the heck you are and what in the heck your company does for a living. And I would probably include, why was that going well, right? Because part of what you're talking about with disaster financing is, I was doing well and then COVID-19 happened and now I'm not doing so well. So we should probably have some information about who I am and why I was doing well. Followed then by, okay, then COVID happened, dun, dun, dun. And so what has that meant for your company? Sorry, I'm being so weird today. I just realized I made that sound out loud.
I think documenting too, the what went wrong is important because we don't know yet what they're going to look at, right? But both of these PPP and the EIDL have both said you had to be economically impacted by COVID, right? So
Mhm.
having something documented that says what that impact was or what you believe it to be, right? Some people haven't seen the full impact of it truly financially yet, but they will.
Mhm.
So documenting that, so that's in place when they come ask for it.
Absolutely. So then it's, who am I? What was I doing? What was going well? What is happening? So like, is it a sales decrease? Is it employees that didn't come to work because of their own health or, any of that kind of stuff? And then, how much money do I need? And there's two different, like, there's how much money do I want you to give me is not the same as how much money do I need, right? And so you should probably know how much money you need. You should also have pre-calculated what you should be getting in PPP money and EIDL money. Your SBDC coach or any of these fine accounting professionals can help you with that. But then how do you plan to pay it back? Right? Because what if your entire PPP loan isn't forgiven? The EIDL money, other than the advance, that's a loan. So how do you plan to pay it back? Because that's a question anybody trying to give you a loan would probably ask. Like, if your cousin came to you and asked you for a loan, you'd probably ask, "Hey, cuz, do you have a job?" So, like, just don't make it so complicated. Just be like, if I lend somebody some money, what would I want to know? And then I should probably write that down.
Good advice. Good advice. Yes, I think a lot of people overthink this a little bit. So this was a good time to transition into our innovate about what we can do differently now and in the future. So in regards to the business narrative, Rebecca, where would you begin when writing a business narrative?
Well, if it were me, I would go to our website where I've written down exactly what you should put in this thing. That's where I'd go.
I will take us to that website right now.
Oh, look, here's our lovely website.
And then you scroll down, and then right there, financial response to COVID-19, when you click on that, because it says, read on for what to do now. Here's a document that is up to date, has your cash flow management practices, talks about a cash runway. And then when we get down lower here, we have business documentation, the kind of information that you're going to need. And then there's, lo and behold, there it is, business narrative. And there are 4 different bullet points here of information that you can start filtering through and gathering that information. When do you think someone might ask to see this, Rebecca?
The trick to this is to have it at your fingertips. So if someone says, "Oh, I have a question about thinga," you don't have to be like, "Oh, let me call Nicola. She'll get you the information." That underwriter isn't going to still be on the phone once you get a hold of Nicola and she drops her current client to do the thing you need for you. They're not going to still be on the phone. The trick is to have that done before you get asked the question. So between now and when you get asked something is when I would do this.
So Nicola, let's go to you. What would your advice be for people that are feeling very unprepared during this crisis? This kind of turning over the log in the woods and realizing, oh, wow, there's a whole lot underneath here that I wasn't prepared for. How can people be better prepared looking forward?
Going forward, to be better prepared, they should really connect with their accountant. And that's where you start. And then kind of go over a plan for the future and in any documents that you would need to apply for a loan, keep those together, maybe in a file. Things like your tax returns and your sales tax returns or anything that you pretty much use and generate in your business. Just kind of keep that together for the future whenever you need to or apply for a loan. So it's good to regularly meet and talk with your accountant and just to kind of get things straight and prepare for the future, because you just really never know what's going to happen. So.
Okay, thank you. Shauna, yay, I got my loan. Now what?
So don't go spend it. We've had that conversation with a lot of people. No, you don't get to touch this money, not one dime of it, until we have a plan in place for what we're going to do with it. So I think the forecasting tool is really important for the PPP and the tracking, because that's going to be very critical as far as making sure you use the funds on qualified expenses, but also your forgiveness piece. So I think really tracking that well. But I think also making that forecast. So PPP aside, if you get some of these disaster funds and this loan, understanding what am I going to use this money for, and how long is it going to, what kind of runway do I get if I take these funds? Like putting together a cash flow forecast is really important. I think that's important for business every day of the week, every day of the year, COVID or not, having a cash flow forecast where you're looking ahead. A lot of people will have the cash flow statement at the end of the month if they close their books, but they're not looking ahead at their cash flow. So I think that's even more important now that you have these funds, that it doesn't just feel like, oh, I've got this windfall, I'm safe. Now I've got to think about how am I going to use this money to make my business better and come out stronger at the end? Like, what should I be using it for? How long does that get me? So I think forecasting and being really smart with how you use the money is really important. Have a plan in place.
Do you have a recommended resource for these forecasting tools?
Well, I'm happy if you want, I can share a cash flow forecasting tool that we share with people when I speak at the SBDC, and that I think is, it can be a little bit complicated if you're not really familiar with that, but it at least gives you an idea of how to start. There's, your bank may have, some banks actually have some technology that helps you see how you're spending your money and can help you forecast it in the future. But I think at the end of the day, looking very high level at your financials and looking forward, it's not very difficult to do a very high level cash flow forecast if you know your major expenses that you have and your average revenue that you bring in, just using Excel and just putting together, a cash flow tool that way. But the most important thing with all of this, none of this is possible if you're not keeping up with your books. So, a lot of people will wait until they go see Nicola at the end of the year, do the taxes, and they'll wait, and then they'll give her all their stuff and say, figure it out. You have no idea how your business is done. I highly recommend that you keep up with your books on a monthly basis. Whether you've got somebody in-house to do that, you're sending them to your accountant, some CPAs will do that for you throughout the year. Keep up with your books, because when stuff like this comes up and you're looking for a loan or you're looking for financing and you say, well, the last financial statement I have is from December of 2018, it's a lot harder to get those to go through. So
Yeah, I have been in Nicola's office and physically seen the kerfuffle that people bring to her in boxes. And I'm like, what? Who are these people? How do they know if they're making any money? And she's like, that's what they pay me for. I was like, yeah, but when did they find out? This is like an actual, not like a shoebox. To be clear, it's like a cardboard box that you would move physical clothes in that they're hauling to her house, not her house, but her office. I'm like, these people don't know if they're making any money. They just know if they have cash in their pocket.
Right.
looking at your bank statement is not telling you how your business is doing, just
Right.
FYI. So.
Yeah. Any more than the old cash book register used to tell you how much money you had in the bank, right?
Exactly.
Nicola, any final advice?
Final advice, use this as a lesson, an opportunity to try to go over your business, go over your financials, and try to pivot, try to make your business stronger whenever things like this come up unexpectedly. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rebecca, any final advice from you?
I think we've had plenty of advice from me today.
Well, I wanted to give equal time, Shauna.
No, but I will just share, if anybody, I'll put my email here in the chat. If anybody wants to email for some tools, we've got like a weekly checklist that we recommend for accounting, as well as a monthly close checklist that I'll share, just to help you keep up on it as you go along. I highly recommend that. So
That would be great. So I want to thank our partners, Casey SourceLink, for helping us bring this Better Together Tuesdays to you. And make sure that you take a look at Casey SourceLink for lots and lots of resources related to COVID-19. And then, of course, check out the Missouri Small Business Development Center, or the Missouri SBDC. You can contact me, Rebecca. There's a contact form there, which is the best way if you don't have a pre-existing relationship, I didn't want to say condition, relationship with the center, you want to start with that contact form, feel free to reach out. That's why we're here, is to help you navigate business and keep it simple even in complex times like these. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you to Shauna, Nicola, and to Rebecca for being my guests. And stay tuned. We'll tell you more about future episodes very soon. Have a beautiful day.